So welcome everyone. This seminar is co-sponsored by the AU Libraries. So thank you for the snacks, the nice spread there. Our guest today is Cristian Acosta. Cristian has an agronomist degree from the University of Cundinamarca. I'm looking at him. Yeah, okay, I got approval in Bogota, Colombia. He worked as an agricultural technician at several farms in Colombia, including on palm oil plantations. He's been in New York. He worked for the Fillmore greenhouses here in the county. And since 2022, he's been agriculture extension officer for the Cornell Cooperative Extension in Allegheny County, where notably he's the Master Gardener Program Coordinator. Michelle went, yay. With that, floor is yours. And I think you have your own microphone, right?
Thank you. Perfect. Hi, everybody. So again, my name is Cristian Acosta. I'm agriculture educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension. And well, thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here today presenting this presentation called Roots of Wisdom, the Ancestral Gardening in Indigenous Knowledge in Colombia. So a little bit of, okay, now a little bit of my background. So I'm agricultural scientist. I have been associated with about environmental management systems. I have been doing some research with multiple areas, so like oil palm trees, plant pathology, and also some experience with native orchids in Fusagasugá. That's the name of the town where I was studying and I was working. And also in extension, working with communities in La Guajira, that's the area, La Guajira, Colombia. And this is why I'm here, sharing a little bit of this experience with you. And well, let's start. I feel that I need to rush a little bit because it's a lot of information, a lot to share in just a short time. So about indigenous communities in Colombia, so we have around 2 million indigenous people in Colombia. That is about 4% of the total Colombian population. So we have around 115 indigenous peoples, and from these 115, we have around 64 Amerindian languages. So as you can see here, so we have, yeah. So the orange areas is where we can find indigenous communities in Colombia. So it doesn't mean that all of that orange area is only indigenous. So of course we have more people living there from, there is a term that I'm gonna introduce you in a little bit about how we are referred from the indigenous communities. So the area where I was working is La Guajira. So it's up here where you can see that area. So there is where we can find the Wayuu communities. So the Wayuus, they are located in that area. And well, here you can see some of the information about raining seasons, and I'm gonna be talking about that in a little bit. So first, the area. So from that part of Colombia, up here, the north of Colombia, so we find this small area between Venezuela and Colombia. In that area, like the name is Fonseca, La Guajira. And so we have Wayuus, the Wayuu community. That's the name of the community that I was working with. They have around 14 clans that they are distributed in all this area. So all of this is La Guajira. And the one that I was working with and I'm sharing today this experience is down here. So the name for this indigenous reservation was Maya Vancloma, so it's a long name, that it comes from how they are distributed. So they are formed by rancherias, that's the name. And what is a rancheria? So here in the US is like a neighborhood. If you compare about size, a neighborhood. It's not big like a town or even a village. It's just a couple houses. You can see the picture down here. So it's something like this. Just a couple houses distributed around, about 5-10 houses, and that is a rancheria. So the rancherias, they are called Mayalita, Bangañita, La Gloria, and La Loma. So you can see this is where the name comes from, Maya, Ban, Loma. This is a Wayuu community. So we have, like I mentioned before, around 115 indigenous peoples. This is just one of them. And for them, so they have a matrilineal society. So the women is the most important part of the society. Even the last name, the new generation, the kids, they get the last name from their mothers, not from the father. The leader of this group is the cacique. That's the name for the cacique. And the original language that they speak is the Wayunaiki. And of course, they are bilingual, so Wayunaiki and Spanish. And something particular from this community is the Wayuu weaving. So something like this. So this is the Wayuu bag. I don't know if here to show the zoom. So this is one of the main, like from the economy, their economy, and also their culture. This is one of the main, I don't know how to call instrument, the main representation. So this is 100% made, handmade. The body of the mochila is called mochila. It's a bag. It's made by women, and this one that is called the gasa, the strip, is made by men. So it's working together to make these ones. So this is the representation from them, and also the hammocks. And as you can see, they always use different, like repetitive patterns, and it has a meaning for them. So that is part of the culture. And this is just to give you an introduction about the culture, about where is this located, and what is the indigenous community that I was working with. Because we're going to be focusing more into gardening, right? So how are they doing to grow, how they grow their plants, how they are gardening. So probably we can hear about indigenous gardening, and it's like, oh, nice. So being out in nature, and it's great. But it's not that great for these communities. So in general, Wayuu communities, because it's literally gardening in the desert. So it's very dry. The seasons, if we can call seasons, because in Colombia we don't have the seasons like winter and fall and like the 4 seasons that we have here. So we have just, when we refer about seasons, is about just raining seasons. And it's just for a couple months. So about 5 months a year it's raining, and then dry, completely dry. So livestock farming is the main activity, and then horticulture. So for horticulture, the main crops is yuca, corn, beans. There is one called mamon that I see the picture didn't say here. It's like the Spanish lime, and watermelon, plantain. Of course, there are more like introduced seeds, because you can see even at some point tomatoes and some of the vegetables, but they are not original from these areas. But these ones, they are like yuca, corn, beans. So most of the land is unproductive because the salt. There is a lot of salt. So as you can see, the previous one, so it's a coast area. So high in salt, high in sodium, and also low water. So the challenge is, it's very challenging about growing something around there. So of course, these plants, they are adapted to these areas, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. There are some crops like the marañón, that is the cashews, but mostly for the fruit, not for the dry fruit. So also the yuca, as you can see here, And these ones, they are native, original from these areas. So it's not introduced. So nowadays, of course, there are more introduced ones, but these are the original ones. So to start talking about the gardening and the ancestral gardening and their beliefs, so we need to talk about the cosmology. So how is the Wayuu cosmology? So because when we talk about gardening here, it's like, okay, just the seeds and going to buy some seeds and the potting mix or different tools, and that's it. It's just a natural resource. We can grow, we can eat about that, and that's it. For them, it's not only that, it's also part of the culture and also spiritual beliefs. So that is why we need to talk about the cosmology. So the Wayuu cosmology, they have the main deity, like the god, is called Malewa. So for them, Malewa is the god who created everything, brought life into the existence, and everything, like plants, animals. He is the cat for them. Then we have different spirits. So focus more into the gardening and horticultural environment. We have Pulowi. So Pulowi is the female spirit that she is associated with the land and like the wild land. And she's the female spirit. Now we have the male spirit, the Pulowi's counterpart, and he is called Huya. So even for me, it's a little challenging to pronounce these ones. And so Huya is the spirit of the rain. Basically, is the rain. So he is the one who brings life through rain. And they believe that the plants, they have spirits, that they have spirits and they can communicate with these spirits. So like I mentioned before, they have seasons. So I mentioned just like seasons because it's about just water. So the temperature is basically always the same. It's above 80 degrees up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit all the time, all year round. And the only change is about raining. So we have two different raining seasons. That is the Iwa and Huya. Iwa and Huya. So the Huya is the long raining season. It's happening right now. It's from September to December. And the Iwa is a short rainy season that is just from April to May. So it doesn't mean that all these months they have tons of water. It can be raining for a couple of days and then a couple of days completely dry again. So, but it's a long season. So during this long season, we have these crops here. So we have corn, we have bean, watermelon, cantaloupe, sorghum, and squash. And for the short rainy season, there is also sorghum, but it's a different variety. They have their own seeds and also different varieties of seeds. I'm going to mention one of these, one of the beans. Also red corn, so it's more like purple, but it's called red corn. Different bean, and yuca, the cassava, because the yuca is for the long dry season. So based on this, the time to be sowing is like right now is the time to be sowing, and the harvesting is when it's dry, completely dry. And the dry season, so the harvest happens in the IPU. That's the name for the dry season. So what? Cultural practices. And here I want to just compare. So how we do the cultural practices here. So we just think about where to grow, probably a rice bed or out there in the garden, buy the seeds or start the seeds indoors or go to buy the seedlings and then directly into the garden, growing, waiting for the harvest, and that's it. So for them, it's a little bit different. So first, everything starts with the rosa, in that case, with Z, because if it's with S, it's just a flower, a rose. The rosa is it's like touch to the surface. And it's basically that, just cut all the weeds and everything in that area where they're going to be growing, and just slash and burn. And so of course, probably someone say like burning, so that can be contamination and contaminating the area. It's not really. Well, I don't have the numbers right here, but that was part of the environmental engineer. She was the one studying that, and even she approved that it's not really a lot of pollutants or contamination from this rosa. And also, it has some benefits because it is not only repelling some of the animals that can be at some point pests, but also the ashes from this burning. It's like a natural soil amendment and that is going to keep everything ready for the gardening season. And women, they are an essential part of the society, right? So they are the ones in charge of taking care of the seeds and pre-treat the seeds, and also selecting the seeds so they can go around and looking for the plants that they they are strong, like resistant to pest diseases, and then selecting those plants from this. This is not going away. Okay, better. And there are some beliefs that they have, and some of them, they are also funny. So I brought just one of them, for example, for the watermelon. And it's that they can be talking, and it's not like a conjuring, it's more like talking to the plants and talking to the spirits of the plants. For example, for watermelon, when they are sowing the seeds, they keep repeating, be like sisters-in-law. So sisters, because usually sisters-in-law, they don't like much one each other, so they grow separate. So that's one way that the spirit of the plant, that they are telling the plant, be like sisters-in-law. So in that way, they grow separated one from each other. And they practice also, and this is just one example. They have multiple, it's not considered prayers, but it's just repeating like talking to the plants. They practice the crop rotation. So every 2 years, they are rotating the crops, or every year. So it depends. If there is a great harvest, they consider that it's a good harvest, so they plant again the same the next year or the next season. If not, they keep rotating the plants. And it's interesting how they are doing this. They have been doing this for thousands of years, even before science started studying about the crop rotation and how if you keep you have a monocrop, it get a lot of diseases, and then you're challenging and you need a lot of pesticides and all this. And they have been doing this for thousands of years and no need for pesticides. So also about the cleaning, the weeding. So they have only 3 times to be weeding. Usually here we can be weeding every week. They have only 3 times. One before sowing. The second is when the plant has just a couple inches, that is about 20 centimeters tall. And the third one is before the plants produce fruit. So if you think about that scientifically, like we scientists, it's interesting to see the science behind this. So before sowing, because the seeds, they need just the space. They don't need any competition for nutrients, for the sunlight, for any of that. The second one, when the plant is growing, because of course the weeds, they can be very aggressive, and the competition for nutrients and for water and its resources, the weeds probably win. So it's the second one. And the third one, before the plant produces the fruit, because the water and the nutrients can go directly to the fruits and not just to feed the weeds. And this is something that they didn't go to college or study any science, and they knew this for, like I mentioned before, thousands of years. So it's interesting about this. Also about cultural practices. So we have the pest control. So how are they doing about pest control? In that case, something I didn't include in this slide is about some prayers. So because there are some pests that they can be really challenging. So for example, monkeys. So at some point, monkeys in this area, there are not a lot, but for different indigenous communities in different parts of the country, so we can have like monkeys, and they can be really challenging, will be the word. They steal, they break the plants, they do a lot of chaos and damage in the crops. So it's curious how to see how with some prayers it seems to work, so to keep the monkeys away. And just in general, not only with the prayers, or also for some animals around, just trapping, fencing, that's something that we also do, right? For the birds, they put some red and white flags, and also they allow the kids to go playing around the crops because they keep scaring the birds. And for the ants, because it's one of the challenging pests that they may have at some point, is using the ashes and also burning some of the ants' roads, the trails, until they change the path. So that's it. The idea is not to kill the pest, it's just to move to a different direction, a different plants, and that's it. So for the harvesting, that's another part of this. The name is Ashana. And it's interesting how, about the spiritual beliefs also, it's about the dreams. So they can be predicting the harvest, how good or bad it's going to be. So if someone is dreaming with iguanas, for example, with an iguana, so it means that there is going to be a good harvest of corn. If there is a dream with a snake, so it's not negative, it's just that it's going to be a great harvest for squash. Because, or usually like this, any squash, these plants that they grow similar like the snake, they go. So that's why it's associated to the snake. And the rabbits is the same. It's a good sign for watermelon, for a good harvest for watermelon. So who harvests what? Like I mentioned before, women. They are important part. So the women, they are the scientists in the crops, harvesting, collecting the seeds, especially about corns, bean, and sorghum, and selecting the plants from, like they decide, like I'm saving the seeds from this plant is stronger, and they are studying, analyzing the crop in general, and selecting the plants for the seeds. And they are saving the seeds, treating the seeds if it's necessary with some sand, something to keep them dry, allowing the seeds to dry with directly sunlight. And also, they don't use any plastic containers. So they believe that plastic is not good to store in any seeds or anything natural. So just, it can be metal, it can be clay, it can be glass. So right now, like nowadays, they're using mostly glass. Some bottles of drinking something, then saving the glass for seeds storing. Also have something nice that they also have, and I learned in this project, in this experience, was that they are constantly talking to the plants. And like I mentioned before, they think that the plants that they have a spirit is not only a natural resource. So they go talking to the plants, asking the crops, the plants for cooperation, asking like permission sometimes to take parts of the plants, and talking to the plants, especially if it's about something for medicinal purposes. It doesn't matter what plant. So it's talking to the plant, asking, like, I have this disease or I have this pain. I will need to take a part of you. And so if you allow me, and I'm gonna do it. So it's not like the plant can answer yes or not. But they ask for permission before going to cut one part of the plant and use it for a medicinal purpose. And they think that it's way different when you do it just taking the plant and that's it, smashing and doing your own remedy, home remedy, than talking to the plant before doing that. So yeah, they ask for that permission. And someone also important in this society, in the Wayuu society, is the Piachi. So Piachi, you can see this name. So the Piachi, The Piachi, they are spiritual leaders, and they are the ones who easily dream, have like this power, if we can say power, that they they get from dreaming or from like a trance that they have, and some visions that they can have about anything. And they are using a lot of the plants for rituals for blessings, for protection, for cleansing. At some point, I was part of one of those rituals that we were doing a study. So this wasn't anything really disturbing their environment or anything. We were just studying the, well, in my case, plants, horticultural methods, and spiritual beliefs, and different an anthropologist, different, well, a group with different professionals, learning from them because they needed a document. Is part of one of the challenges. I'm not going to go deep into this one, to avoid one of the part of the corruption that is one of the main challenges there, and not from the indigenous, just from the local governments and this part that unfortunately there's a lot of corruption there. So of course we are not always welcomed. And let me check one of these ones. So the white men, I forgot to mention, we are called alihuna. So this is the term that's given to us. So the white man, or the one that people that they are not indigenous, they are alihunas. So at some point, some people, they didn't want us there. And the Piachi, she was the one detecting, like dreaming about that there were some bad energies, some like negativity, some plans or something against the group of alihunas that we came to this area. And that's why I mentioned I was part of that rituals for cleansing. So going early in the morning, walking a lot to go to a river, and using different plants. So why not mentioning many of these plants, especially the medicinal ones? So that's something like top secret. I wasn't allowed to go into that area. What I'm sharing here today is what I was learning, but there is a lot more that they are not sharing with an alihuna. And so some of these plants, and that's part of how the perception and the cultural perception that we have is, for example, cannabis. So this was part of this ritual, just to soak in some water and have a bath with that, mixed with many other plants, but just seen as a spiritual tool, as more in the spiritual, I don't know how to say that word, that importance that they put, and not just with that conception that is just to use it and get high or something like that. And that is something nice to learn also, about that respect that they show to the plants. And also some part of the rituals when there is no rain, like I mentioned, sometimes we can, right now, it's a raining season. And I always say rainy season, because sometimes it can be a rainy season, but it can be completely dry. So when there is a drought, someone, especially the Piachis, they can dream about a dance. So it's like the spirits, they are asking for a dance, and they can perform some dance rituals to attract the rain. When I mention rituals, it's not like sacrificing, just to make this clear, because sometimes we hear rituals and we think about animal sacrifice or something like that. No, it's nothing like that. They are not aggressive. They are not, that's something to mention. They don't use violence, and they have their own justice system and their own rules, but violence is just like literally the last step when there is nothing else to do. Usually the punishments and everything is just like, okay, you did something wrong, so you can pay with goats or with animals, and even the violence at some point is just like some with a forget wisp or something like this. It's nothing very aggressive. So when there is the drought periods, someone dreams about performing a Kaulayawa. Kaulayawa, that's the term. Kaulayawa. So that's the spiritual ceremony for that male spirit that brings the life through the rain. And I went back. Also, the moon is really important for them. So even for the traditional agriculture, some people, they take in mind the moon. So in that case, it's of course way important for them. So for the new moon, that is the Palakai, they are sowing the plants that they grow in the soil. So like yucca, sweet potatoes, or just allowing the soil to rest, to take a rest, and it's this for soil preparation. For waxing moon, that is the Pala Murua, the sowing is to be sowing now the rest of the plants, the squash, the watermelon, everything that grows above the soil. And for the full moon, that is the Pala Mutsuuin, the harvest is for harvesting and fertilizing. So you can see it's only 3 of the phases. So that's where they are doing gardening. So for the winning moon is the term, the next moon phase. So for this one, nothing. So not only for agriculture, like not cutting your hair, not nails, clipping, anything, because that's the period of time where like nothing can really grow. So the growing season is mostly for the waxing moon, so the period of fast growing. Something that we learn from Wayuu communities is something that have potential to keep studying for challenging, for the environmental challenging, so for climate change. And is this adaptation to a very harsh environment. You can see this crop of beans. So the beans is called the frijol guajiro because it's from La Guajira, right? So frijol bean, frijol guajiro, and you can see that it's all green. And look at the soil. So if you see some soil like this, it's like, no, like nothing is gonna grow there. Like, no. So I have been working with extension, and sometimes I get someone saying like, oh, my soil is terrible. Nothing grows there, it's just bad. And the soil is dark. So usually just by eye, when the soil is dark, it's rich in organic matter. Probably something wrong with the pH or with the nutrients or over-fertilizing sometimes. But it's still good. So how about this one? So it's sand, basically. You water and then the water is gone. So we have good soil. And of course, they have also some parts, some areas that the soil is dark, mostly in the mountains. The soil is dark, and the problem is about rocky, lots of stones and rocks in there, but good organic matter. But in general, this is what they face. So even in that area, you can see that the plants are green and they look healthy, and they are healthy. So this frijol guajiro is just one example of adaptation to climate change. So it tolerates dry periods of time, so very, very dry conditions. And it can be growing fast, just with some rain, some water, because they don't have a lot of water to be watering the crops. So only 3 months, and they can be harvesting for about 8 months or 9 months. So this is just one example, one of the plants that they share, because of course they try to keep their own seeds, because one of the challenges that they have is also the introduction of new seeds, so just commercial seeds. So it's way different, because look at this environment, and now try to grow some hybrid watermelons that we have in a place like this. So the plants is not even germinating. So that's one of the challenges. And also the beans, usually they get a lot of pests if you have been growing beans around here. So you deal with aphids and with different diseases, etc. This one naturally is resistant to these pests and diseases, and they don't apply any pesticides. Nowadays, that's another challenge about introducing pesticides or that they have to use with the new seeds that they are incorporating. Some regulations from the country that they are like forcing people to use commercial seeds. So that's one of the challenges. So of course, we have more challenges that you can see here, like the contamination from carbon extraction companies. Even, well, I'm not mentioning the companies exactly, not be controversial, but there is like an American company that they are in there, in that area, very, very close to the Wayuu communities, and all that the carbon and the fumes and everything from that extraction goes directly to the water that they have. And this is a picture of how much water they have. So basically, these companies, and also for the corruption of the government, they give most part of the good water to these companies, leaving just almost zero or nothing to the indigenous, and sometimes they have to steal the water when it's their water and go to the river and create like some like be channeling, and at the end they are just with some small, because it's not even 1 inch thick, the hoses like you can see in this picture, and having this amount of water just about 2 times a week and for consumption. So this is not even for gardening. And for gardening is mostly from the rains. So just waiting for the rain period and that I was mentioning before, the rain seasons, and that's it. So that's part of the challenges. Of course, if they don't have even enough water to drink and to eat, so in that case, not water for the plants. And it's not the best quality. Of course, it just comes from the river. So it's not the clean and sweet water that we can enjoy. And also, so that is a difficult to access to nutritious food and environmental stressors. So of course we have very hot environment, a lot of salt, a lot of sodium, the corruption about the management of the resources. That's why we were working in this project to help them to get the resources directly. Something to compare here is like the federal funds going to actually to the indigenous reservation and not to the small towns that they were the ones stealing the money. And also no technologies. So here we have even apps and sensors and a lot of technology to tell about how is the pH, how is the humidity, how the plants are getting enough sun or not, artificial lights, and a lot of technology that they are not using. So it's all natural process. And like I mentioned before, the introduction of commercial seeds, what causes the loss of biodiversity. So that's something that they are trying to fight about, like not physical fight, just trying to keep part of that culture and their seeds. And also the migration from the new generations to the cities, not even learning the Wayuu, that is the language, the native language, and just changing beliefs. Now you can see Christian religions and different religions introduced to this area, and taking just different lifestyles. So that's something that makes creates like a challenge for the culture and the beliefs that they have and that they have had for thousands of years. So something that we can learn from this and that I learned also from this project working with the Wayuu communities in La Guajira, Colombia, is to be grateful for what you have, for what we have. So really we have an easy gardening around here, around many places, not only in the US. And so be grateful for what we have. Sometimes it's not that the soil is terrible or that we have a black thumb, it's that we just don't know how to grow our plants. Also because there is a challenge with commercial seeds, of course, the need for pesticides, the need to be taking more care of the plants. So it's important also to consider the plants. And in my family, even my grandmother, she wasn't an indigenous, but she was always that I remember, always talking to the plants, always considering the plants like something more than a natural resource, not just to decorate the house and that's it. It was just something part of her life. And talking to the plants, and you can see like the difference. And these also work with the animals. Like, well, this is for another time. How also in Colombia, some research projects they find that the cows they produce more milk when they play some music, like positive music. Many of these ancestral knowledge that, like I mentioned before, they have been practicing for thousands of years, and then we, the scientists, we are like thinking everything right. Like if it's not proven, it's not real. When there is something in between, and we can learn, like they can learn a lot. They learn a lot from us, and we learn way more from them. And that point in between is something when it's nice. It's not any extreme. Because like just this being the freehold Guajiro, we can be learning and taking some of these plants to help for the climate change and to resist, to be resilient is the word, resilient. And like this little bean is resilient to that environment, very harsh environment. We can be adapting part of this knowledge for a sustainable agriculture, also for looking for sustainable methods, the use of the water. That sometimes we don't need to be with the sprinkler all day long for the plants. Just one deep watering is better than watering the plants very often. The organic methods, like I mentioned before, not going to pray, probably is not going to work for us like the same prayers and sayings that they have. But keeping organic methods with, for example, we have heirlooms. So instead of going for the fancy hybrids all the time, well, see what is new, probably just keeping some of our original plants, because also we have native plants here in the US and wherever we go. And at some point, this project also is a call to action for the advocacy for environment and social justice and awareness and support for indigenous communities, not only in Colombia, everywhere, because that's part of the culture that we are losing in general all around the world. And that's happening also in Colombia. So just as conclusions, the Wayuu people's approach to gardening, to agriculture, is teaching us that importance for the protection of natural resources, to using efficiently the natural resources and respecting our plants, respecting our environment, not seeing that just like a natural resource, is having that deeper connection with the earth, with what is literally feeding us. And while many of us, we have a lot of resources to be growing whatever we want, the technology, so they are constantly facing these challenges for water and food, corruption, etc. So that reminds us that we have that privilege and we can do something about. So I'm not calling specific groups, but you can easily find nice actions that you can do for indigenous people in the Wayuu community in Colombia or in many other areas. And learning from this, from this group, from the Wayuu people and the indigenous communities, not only Wayuu, so we can start changing. So changing our mind. And it was like, I talk from my personal experience because I went to the university for 6 years and then research projects, and I never had anything like this. And it was like a before and after this project, and learning from them. It's a different point of view now about gardening, about environment, about the traditional agriculture, and the challenges that all of us we are facing and the new generations are facing for about climate change and many challenges that we have nowadays. So we can go back to our roots and actually learning how to be resilient and share this for new generations. So thank you about this. This is just one of the pictures that I have, like a special one. Unfortunately, for most of the pictures that I had, I was posting these ones. I had more of these ones on Facebook, and then I got hacked. So I lost many of those memories. And this is a special one that fortunately I had. They were the ones teaching me, actually. I learned how to be sewing one of these ones. And yeah, so thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yeah. Oh, one second. I'll walk up. Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned all the tasks that the women are in charge of. What do the men do besides eat the food?
Yeah. Well, I was focusing more in the the role of the women, and men, of course, they are important, and of course they are doing the tasks like hard labor, and but yeah, like I mentioned about the kneading, so they are the ones doing this part. Only that on this part, it takes about 1 month doing it, like every day doing it, and 1 month also for the body of the bag. And yeah, they like the cacique usually is a man, the leader of the group. Also, but it doesn't mean that the leader it's only a man. So usually it's a man, but also there are cacicas, so like women, the leader of the group, and they are mostly like for when it's the moment for justice, like to run always helping to keep people around. So yeah, I focus more in the role of women and see how they are really important in the society and be selecting the seats and being very also part of the brain. Something that they have that they said, even just joking, it was that it's important the women because you can even to give the last name to your kids because you can really prove that your mom is your mom, that the kids they come from the mom's body, but while the father is like it can be anyone. So they were just joking about that, and but it's a way that they mention. So it's really important because it's like where all of us we come from. But yeah, of course, men they are really important for the society too.
I think you mentioned earlier in the talk that they do some horticulture, but they also do a lot with livestock. That they do a lot with livestock as well, animal agriculture. Are there any systems that integrate the two or practices?
Yeah, so the number one activity is livestock. So with goats, mostly like goats and cows, and so it's like the two different ones. Agriculture, horticulture is mostly to survive. It's mostly to eat, like to use locally. And yeah, of course, at some point in the farming, so they can be running together. So the compost, the manure from the cows, from the animals, they can be incorporated as organic matter for the corn crops, and using some of the corn to feed some of the animals. But for most of the animals, they are using something from the outside, like what's the name? Kibo. some commercial produced food, because that one is more to sell and more commercially to sell to the local cities, to the alihunas. And horticulture producing is more for eating, for subsistence. Yeah. Better plan.